From the perspective, oh, sorry, there, okay. They're going to be considering MOOCs from the perspective of educational innovation. And our first speaker today is Anne-Mette Nortvig. She is from the University College Zealand, and she is going to be giving a talk entitled The Double Classroom, Design Patterns Using MOOCs in Teacher Education. Thank you.
Thank you. I brought my fans. Now we have listened to a presentation the whole day concerning MOOCs that are massive and open and online and courses. And now I would like you to imagine a MOOC that is not massive but is very small, because I come from Denmark, and that is quite a small country. So to produce a massive open online course in Danish, that is impossible. So for a moment you have to imagine a MOOC that is a small one. And moreover, I would like you to imagine that this MOOC, well, not imagine, but think that this MOOC is not live, it is not going on as we investigated. It is, well, I would not say dead, but archived. So the MOOC that I'm talking about is not a live and a massive one, but an archived and a small one. Such a MOOC is often called a SPOC, a small private online course. And that is what we are looking at in this study. So the context that we have done this study in is at a teacher training faculty in Denmark. At our faculty, we teach a very heterogeneous group. We have older students, younger students, dyslexic students, students that are occupied with getting home in a hurry to look for their children. They have to stay and do their jobs. And some of them are young and more traditional students. Our students, like students in general, they often ask for flexibility. And we love our students, and we would like to do what they ask us to do. So we work very hard to create courses that are flexible. Traditional teaching can include archived MOOCs or SPOCs, as I told about, and that is what we are going to look at. In Denmark, the in-service teachers, some of them need to study a certain subject that they need to teach in primary or lower secondary schools. And for that purpose, we have some years ago created this SPOC that other students that are not in service but are more traditional students, they can access this MOOC in traditional teaching. So do you get the concept? We have this MOOC, well, we have this SPOC for in-service that are designed for in-service teachers, and now the course is finished, and we look at this MOOC as it is archived, and we look for ways to use this archived SPOC in our regular teacher training. Do you get the concept, sort of? Yeah, maybe. Our research question is then, how can learning design patterns that integrate MOOCs, and when I say MOOC you always have to think that, well, she means SPOC, but it is a MOOC concept. It is designed as a traditional MOOC, and the massive aspect is, and we call it massive because it can be scaled to reach a massive bunch of students if we had so many Danish-speaking students. So how can learning design patterns, and I'll get back to what a learning design pattern is, that integrate MOOCs contribute to solving the central challenges of differentiation at different levels in teacher training. And this differentiation has to do with this heterogeneous group of students that we have, and we would like to look at ways to work with differentiation in this group of students. So in my presentation, we will look at the overall goal is to design for learning that solves a problem that is concerned with differentiation in teacher training. And we do that by the use of the integration of MOOCs, and we show it by the use of learning design patterns. I forgot to tell you that I have not written this paper alone. My colleague Carsten Günther is also the author, but he's just relaxing for the rest of the day. He's my boss, so, well. The methodological and theoretical framework that we have taken a point of departure in while we did our studies was design-based research with co-participating educators. Because the educators at our teacher training faculty, they are the ones that are the experts, and and they're the ones that know the students at our teacher training faculty. So we wanted to collaborate with the educators while we did these experiments of integrating MOOCs, archived MOOCs, into traditional teacher training. Design-based research is concerned with looking for problems to solve. That is always a nice thing to do, especially if you can find a solution. So we looked for problem, and in this case, that is the differentiation problem. Then we did in collaboration with the educators, we made learning designs, and we tested these learning designs that integrated this box into the traditional teaching. We redesigned these learning designs, and then we did interpretations. We had this community of researchers and educators collaborating, and together we looked for the problems, we identified them, we created learning designs, we tested, we observed what was going on, and we interpreted together. So there wasn't this divide between researchers and educators. We all acted as if we were researchers. We always do act like we are. And we were also inspired by the way of looking at learning design that is framed by Moore in some years ago. And he speaks of design narratives and design patterns. And he suggests that a design narrative, that is a way of speaking of learning design, that the experienced teacher, when he wants to tell what is going on in his teaching, then he tells this he communicates his learning design in the form of a narrative. And then as a researcher, you can look at many narratives, and then you can see the patterns in these design narratives, and then you can, in a more formal way, communicate what is going on in this learning design. And this way of communicating learning design is might be an effective might look for effective solutions to pedagogical problems. So in this teacher training faculty, we did a qualitative case study, and we based our interpretations on observational data and interviews with the teachers and the educators. So, and before I told you that we have this community of researchers and educators, and the educators took part of this group, and then another group of educators tried the experiments that we designed in the researchers group. So I say educators, and that can mean that they are part of the research team, but some of them were not part of the research team, but looked at the learning designs and responded to it and tested it, but did not take as much part of in the investigation and interpretation as the research team did. So I'll move on. What we found in when we interpreted these learning designs was 5 patterns, and I'll just tell you about 2 of them. We have written about the others elsewhere. We look at we tested this design with integrating MOOCs into traditional teacher training, and one of the ways that we did that was through what we call a parallel classroom. The context is these campus classes that, and traditional class consists of 25 to 35 student teachers in the traditional classroom. And the problem that we tried to solve with this learning design was the differentiation problem and the need for flexibility. That can be difficult in teacher training, and in general, the research tells that it is not a problem that is very much worked with in teacher training, which is a bit funny when in primary schools they work, well, in Denmark they work very much and the teachers are very concerned with differentiation. But in teacher training we are not that concerned with it. We try to be. The solution that we saw as a solution to this pedagogical problem was 2 parallel learning designs that was going on campus and in the MOOC. And that was, and we tried this learning design as a way to let the student choose whether he wanted to participate in the on-campus teaching or he wanted to participate and choose the resources that were in the MOOC, because the MOOC that was created for the in-service teachers consisted of videos and quizzes and assignments and all sort of traditional MOOC stuff. And if these teachers, they were unable to attend teaching on campus, then they could choose to participate in the archive MOOC. And in the study groups, they could discuss what was going on in the MOOC. And when they came back after maternity leave or a lot of jobs or sick children, then they wouldn't have missed anything from the teaching. They could come back and participate because they could follow what had happened in the on-campus teaching. So there was an opportunity to have a more flexible program, a more flexible pace, time and space for the students. They could choose when they wanted to participate in the classroom and when they wanted to participate in the MOOC. So the student, he could or she could choose his own path, sometimes during taking part in the MOOC and sometimes on campus. Yes, but we tried to solve the problem, but we didn't quite succeed because there was the teachers, the educators, they still found it very difficult to accept a lot of students, because educators, they really like to be with their students and they like to look at them in the classroom and help them and work with them. And in interviews, they often told us that if the students were not in the physical classroom on campus, they were just working at home in MOOC, then they missed their sweet little, well, they are older people, but they really like and talk of them with love and affection, and they miss their sweet little students if they're not in the classroom. And for some of the educators, that was a problem, because without students in the classroom, are you a teacher then? And also it was difficult for the educators to lose this educator-centeredness, because when students, they could work in the MOOC and choose their own path and do exercises and assignments and quizzes, then the MOOC was more centered on the students and not on the teachers. Some of these educators on campus, they really liked this traditional teacher role in the classroom. So we tried to work it, but we didn't succeed all the way. Then the next learning design pattern is what we call the double classroom. The context is that we have a lot of study hours, but only 270 study hours and 76 face-to-face lessons on campus. These lessons on campus traditionally, very often, consist of lectures and exercises and dialogues, and a small number of these lessons are used for guidance sessions and feedback. And our students, they would really like these, to have more feedback from the educators on campus. So we try to work with that. That's too little time for individualized feedback, and the students, because you can see there are many more study hours than lessons on campus, so the students have to work on their own, and some of them find it difficult to spend as much time as the educators want, because the studies are not scaffolded. So the solution that we found in collaboration with the other educators was what we interpreted as the double classroom. This and the learning pattern could be framed as this. It starts with a common introduction, then the students in the classroom can choose to look at MOOC lectures and quizzes and work with the resources in this archived MOOC, and they can choose on their own with which path to follow in the MOOC. And then, because the educator on campus does not have to be present and lecturing and doing all kinds of activities in the classroom, then she can spend her time giving feedback to the students and focusing on the study groups and the individual students. That was the concept. And the students, they can choose pace in the groups, and they can get feedback when they need it, because they can go to the educator who is not lecturing, and then she can help them. But as the former design, it was difficult for the teachers to design for their own activities. And when we tried this learning design, then we saw that a lot of the educators, they didn't know what to do with the spare time. They could give feedback, but a lot of the time the students, they said they needed feedback, but when they were working in the MOOC, they didn't ask for feedback from the educators. So a lot of the time we saw the educators walking around and not knowing what to do. So that was not what we tried to make them scaffold this feedback even more, but the teachers found it a bit difficult to let the students work on their own and design for their own path in the MOOC. So some of the teachers, they, instead of letting the students work on their own in the MOOC, then they tried to design for activities in the MOOC. And they told the students that today you will look at this video at this minute, and then we'll discuss exactly this topic. So the flexibility sometimes got lost in our design. How much time do I have left? Okay. We'll now look at the ways that the educators understood this MOOC, because it was not always the same way as we understood it in the research team. As I mentioned a bit before, the teachers were afraid of being residual and having and even to lose their job, because they sometimes wondered if the MOOC would take over to take that job, and if the MOOC functions very well, then is there a need for educators on campus? But a happy ending for this fear. We saw that when they tried these learning designs, they found out that they were not residual. The students still needed them, and very often they actually preferred to show up on campus to be with their beloved educator and not staying at home all alone. So this fear of losing students in the classroom, I already mentioned that. So we see that there is a need for further research on active inclusion of the teacher in both designs, because we wanted to include MOOC in the traditional on-campus teaching, but we found it not as easy as we thought it would be. And instead of looking at scaffolds for the student teachers, we found out that we also need to look at scaffold for educator activities when archived MOOCs are integrated into the classroom. So the flexibility was found in the learning designs, and it made it possible for the students to design their own path. And we still have to design for the teachers' paths in these learning designs. So small dead MOOC can be integrated into traditional teacher training. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We have time for some questions. When you ask questions, could you please make sure that you have a microphone in hand before you get started? In the back.
So the original MOOC was designed for in-service teachers. So was it designed to complement experiences they would be having in the classroom at the time, or was it fairly independent of the fact that they were in service?
It tried to include practice from the schools, but it was focused on educating the in-service teachers that needed a topic for math. For instance, some of the teachers, they teach math, and they have done so for many years, but they are not educated math teachers. So this in-service teacher MOOCs took care of this problem. And then the concept was, can we use this MOOC that is designed for this specific group in traditional teacher training?
So in your double classroom, your challenge was to create in-class activities that complemented the MOOC?
Yeah.
And did the teachers create those, or kind of learning designers working with the teachers?
Yeah, they did. Yeah, as they always do. Yeah, thank you.
Other questions? Sorry, went over there.
Thank you. So I was wondering, did you, in the MOOC, did you, for instance, use peer activities? Because I'm thinking in teacher training, you know, when the teachers later have to go into the classroom. There's no unique solution. And so a peer activity, you could explore all that space, and then the expert teacher on campus could perhaps take 2 or 3 examples and summarize or follow up on these examples with the expert view.
Yeah.
Do you try something like this?
Yes, they did. They tried all sorts of things and included the ways that they usually teach in the classroom and relying on the students' experiences in
Right.
practice and so on. So they used the MOOC, the archived MOOC, as a learning resource, as just like texts and videos, but it was multimodal and very focused on the specific area of teaching.
Okay. But the on-campus teachers didn't like it that much?
In the beginning, they really didn't like it very much, but they saw that it was not as threatening as they felt in the beginning.
Thank you.
Other questions? In the front.
Yes, thank you for your presentation. I wonder, are there many of these qualitative studies on how the students feel, the MOOC students feel, and how the teachers feel, change of role and so forth? Or are you breaking ground here? I mean, is this a whole literature there? And if so, what would be the bottom line of that literature? How people feel, both students and teachers?
Specifically in Denmark? Or?
No, in general. I mean, you must have looked at the literature, and is that a common finding that MOOC teachers, I mean, yours was a special case, feel threatened, that their role is diminished and that they become residual and so forth? Are you aware of studies in that area?
Yes, I'm aware of some studies, but I don't remember right now what the authors are called. But there is a fear of this new MOOC thing and teachers' roles being threatened. So I don't think we are breaking grounds here in this specific area. But there are not many studies concerned with the integration of MOOCs or archived MOOCs into the classroom, as far as we know.
We have one in the back.
To what extent did you observe a change in the discussions or in the focus of the activities that the student teachers maybe wanted to use in the classroom? Because in the interactions with peers outside of their cohort in Denmark, maybe they brought in new ideas which weren't present in the traditional campus discussions with their educators.
Yeah, they did. Because they could because they used MOOC that was very concerned with the practice and related to in-service teachers, then this MOOC could bring something new into the classroom that were not there before.
So you saw a tangible impact in what the student teachers actually did in the classroom with their students in regards to their practices, sort of collaborative learning or stuff like this?
Maybe small aspects, but we didn't see a revolution there.
Let's thank our speaker again. Our next speaker this afternoon is Claudia Zimmermann from the University of Graz. She is going to be giving a talk entitled Increasing Educational Value, the Transformation of MOOCs into Open Educational Resources.
I don't get out of the way. This is fine. Okay. Well, hello then. I'm Claudia, waiting for the slides to come up. No? Okay, doesn't matter, we can start without them. So I'm here to present a bit of work that I did with two of my colleagues, and what we did was a bit of a literature review So we didn't bring you any empirical data, unfortunately, but we've been trying to explore the topic and the potential combination of MOOCs and open educational resources. So what this presentation will look at is the possible impact that open educational resources could have on MOOCs, and in particular any educational value that might come out of this. So I'm briefly going to talk about the concept of openness with regard to MOOCs, but also with regard to other aspects of openness, and following that we will progress to open educational resources and potential advantages that might come out of using open educational resources in MOOCs, or in the extreme form, to turn full MOOCs into open educational resources. Right. So we all know that one of the O's in MOOC stands for open. But if you were to line up, say, 10 people, and you would ask them, like, what does open mean with regard to massive open online courses, you'd probably get 10 slightly different answers, because there's no real consensus with regard to what does and does not constitute openness in a MOOC. And starting from there, when you look at other areas where open is a defining term, for example, open access, open data, open anything really, especially open education, you will get different meanings of openness. So we've explored like a few avenues, perspectives that you can take on openness that might be helpful, in particular when looking at MOOCs. So there's the first one. What does openness mean? Openness tends to be tied in some way to the path by which the internet bypasses closed and traditionally monetized systems. We can all work with that definition. That's something that comes to mind when you think of MOOCs. Obviously, they're free and they provide education that oftentimes you can only get in a formal education at a university. And so it is a democratizing tool where you provide education to a potentially larger group of people, so more can benefit from it, and people who don't fulfill certain educational requirements also have access to more education if they wish to partake in it. Then there's another group, if you might say, of openness definition that focuses more on the things that you can do or that you should be allowed to do when dealing with open resources, whatever that may be. And that is to freely access, use, modify, and share for any purpose that you might wish with regard to the resource or to the material that we're using. And we can already see here that this is something that we would not traditionally associate with MOOCs. So the access part, yes, the usage part to some degree, but modifying and sharing, that is not something that is core to the MOOC concept, where you have platforms that offer certain content at certain times, but it is not very common for this content to be redistributed by the users, and even less so to be modified by the users. And then there's another group of definitions when it comes to openness that focuses more on the ethical part, on the ideology behind openness, which is well expressed in this quote. It's best, at its best, openness is an ethos and not a license. So when discussing openness, we're often focused on licensing issues and the rights associated with certain materials, but it's really more than that. So there's this view that openness is an ideology. It's an ideal, something to strive for, something to aspire to. And that is something that is also to some degree true of openness with regard to MOOCs, because we do have this sort of mission to make education open, to reach more people, to democratize education. And as we all know, that often clashes with certain financial interests or other things that need to be taken into account when producing and implementing MOOCs. So, in particular, what does this mean when we speak of the openness in MOOCs? So what are the areas where you can speak of a good degree of openness and other areas where there's less openness? So one thing that really speaks for MOOCs is the accessibility. So with most MOOCs, we don't have many restrictions with regard to the access to the MOOC. So there are no educational restrictions usually. There are no regional restrictions other than obvious language barriers. And there are few temporal restrictions. So some course materials only provided at certain times, but during that time period, you're at your leisure to use them at whatever time you please. And there has been a development towards more self-paced learning, self-paced MOOCs, which gives you even more freedom in that regard. So we're good on that front. Affordability is also something that is looking quite good with regard to most platforms. So most MOOC content is usually free. So that means you don't have to pay any tuition fees or any other charges. But there are certain aspects of MOOCs that are not free and affordable in that regard. As we all know, some of the big MOOC platforms have started to charge for certifications, which means that if you have completed a MOOC and you want the certification that you have done so, you have to pay a small fee in order to get that. So that is compromising the idea of affordability for everybody. But in general, the contents, videos, materials, and so on, they're usually free in the sense of that you don't have to pay for them. When it comes to reusability, that is the area where openness is not a high priority with regard to MOOCs. So you do have, you usually don't really have the ability to download stuff, redistribute it, and much less to modify it, which means that you have a certain way of accessing the information. You can watch videos, you can partake in assignments, you can discuss in forums and things like that, but it's really just bound to the platform. And usually this is where the learning happens, and sometimes it moves outside these boundaries to other areas of the internet, but that's pretty much it. Now, when we look at open educational resources, I'm sure most of you are familiar with the basic concept, and you've probably also heard of Creative Commons, which is a very popular licensing scheme that is often used for open educational resources. And it's already like in the 4th generation, so we have CC 4.0, the 4th generation of CC licenses, which already indicates that the open educational movement is a bit older even than the MOOC phenomenon. So the open educational resources movement started in the early 2000s, and MOOC started in the late 2000s. Even although there has never been like quite the same excitement and hype around open educational resources as there has been around MOOCs. So what are open educational resources? Again, there are several definitions out there. I've decided to use this one because it also emphasizes the same points as one of the openness definitions that we've seen earlier, which is that open educational resources can legally and freely be copied, used, adapted, and reshared. And other things that I've emphasized here is that they need to be publicly available, meaning that they can be found in the public domain, or they are licensed with some open licensing scheme, like, for example, Creative Commons licensees. And even there, with some restrictions, because some of the Creative Commons licensees are too restricted to, in the strict sense of open educational resources, be considered open in that definition, because some of them don't allow, for example, modifications. So this is the openness definition for open educational resources, and when we try to bring this together with the openness concept that we've seen in MOOCs, what potentials are there? What can we gain from this endeavor to make MOOCs open educational resources in part or in full? So the first aspect that I would like to elaborate on is the financial aspect, so that we can get this one out of the way. Obviously, this one is important because MOOCs are expensive. There's a lot of cost involved with production, implementation, development, even for providers who don't provide MOOCs for profit. So obviously, it's not the first thing you think about when you have high costs that you have to cover somehow, to give away stuff for free or to make it even more accessible, to make it even freer and more open. But there are some possible advantages in the long run that might be interesting for those providers who don't provide MOOCs for profit. So like, for example, when more content providers, say universities who usually provide their courses on the bigger platforms, when they decide to provide more of the materials in an open fashion with open licensing schemes, then more people have access to that information, and even more than that, they can work with those materials. So there's a lot of effort and resources to be saved there when there's more collaboration between content providers. And since most universities are interested in the option of providing courses, but they don't, let's say, have an expert in every field that might lend itself to a MOOC, or if they would like to do more collaboration with other universities, then this is a good way to get in touch, to exchange information, to exchange materials, and to just foster collaboration between the content providers, which is the next main point that I would like to address. So this is one that is far more obvious. Collaboration between universities is an important aspect of many areas, not just MOOCs. But in particular here, there are several levels where collaboration might benefit from the introduction of open educational resources in MOOCs. Like, for example, content providers, I already mentioned it. If they're working closely, if they are working together, if they're sharing materials, then it is easier to adapt materials, to create new courses, thereby creating more scientific progress, saving resources, and making the whole process more efficient. For example, just by translating courses from one language to another when the materials allow that. And then on the other level of the content users, again, when materials allow modification, adaptation to the specific needs of educators and, of course, of students, then there is a higher degree of collaboration to be expected. Just because you can open the materials up for modification in group projects, assignments, and in various new and innovative ways that might benefit any particular classroom setting. Which brings me to the next point, and that is finally educational value. So the whole collaboration aspect obviously translates to more educational values in the long run. For example, when you think of less developed regions globally, then a steady internet connection can sometimes be a bit of an issue. And this is one of the very few requirements that you have in order to be able to use and partake in MOOCs. You need an internet connection, and you need it for a prolonged period of time. If you want to do a course over, let's say, 4 to 6 weeks, then you need a steady internet connection in order to access the materials as they are released. And when you start to introduce more open materials into MOOCs, then you sort of broaden your options in that regard, because people can download stuff, they can work on the stuff even when their computers are offline, and they need fewer occasions where they actually need to access stuff on the internet and to, for example, partake in quizzes and things like that. So that obviously creates some educational value on that front. The other front is tied to the collaboration aspects. So if MOOC materials or MOOC as a whole are provided as open educational resources, then teachers as well as students have the opportunity to integrate them in their learning process. That means that especially like innovative classroom concepts like flipped classroom or blended learning or other concepts that might be useful for some settings, for some disciplines, for some subjects, they usually benefit from more open materials because people can adapt them to their classroom needs. Teachers can work with them, they can build upon them, and they can pick out like the specific parts that they need. They don't have to buy the whole package. They just can cherry pick whatever aspects, whatever texts, whatever pictures, whatever assignments or so they find useful, and use them in their teaching. So to conclude, one of the, those are the points that repeatedly came up when looking for advantages of open educational resources when applied to the setting of MOOCs. So obviously the collaboration aspect, I've talked about that. Efficiency is also a big aspect, especially with regard to costs, but also to effort, quality, you name it. So once more people partake in the provision of open materials, and then there is more to gain for everybody, which makes processes on all levels a bit easier and more efficient. Then Flexible educational content is also something that benefits from the adaptation and modification of freely available materials, as well as pedagogical settings. So if you have, like, say, a traditional classroom setting and you introduce digital materials that can be freely modified and used, what you usually see is more emphasis on innovative teaching designs, like flipped classrooms, for example. And this is just to start with. This is something that every teacher can decide for themselves in which way they want to work with the means that they have available. And another point that is very important, again, for institutions, for individuals working with MOOCs and open educational resources, and that is that even though you're giving something away for free and you make it more accessible for most people, you gain something from it. So you're not just giving, you get something. And that is also something that is not that far-fetched. So if you provide materials that people like, that people distribute, that get a wider distribution than they would in traditional means, then you build a reputation for yourself as an institution or as an individual who provides and creates content like that. A few examples of how this could look like are found in the German-speaking area. So there's the Austrian platform imoocs.at. This is a platform which hosts a variety of mostly German-speaking MOOCs, and all of them are licensed under a Creative Commons license that enables the participants to not just view the materials and to work with them within the boundaries of the MOOC, but to download them and to use them for whatever purpose they see fit. And the same principle is applied to the German platform Moin, which also has this ideological background of making the educational materials available for a longer period of time. And this is what this could look like when you actually provide a MOOC like this. So as you can see here, you have the title of the MOOC. I apologize for the fact that it is in German, but it has something to do with diagnosing illnesses by the internet, a very popular course at our platform. And you see right below that, in the line with the details about the course, there is a CC BY NC, short for Creative Commons license. BY means attribution, so you have to name the source where you get the material from, and NC means non-commercial, so you cannot use the content of this MOOC for commercial purposes. But other than that, you're free to do whatever you want with it. You can use it in your own classroom setting, you can use the videos for something else, you can modify them in any way that seems useful to you, and you can redistribute them over any channels that you think are useful for your purpose or for the materials themselves. So what we would hope to see in the future is that more platforms and more content providers at least engage in the idea of the possibilities that could arise when more materials are provided openly and freely for more people. Because as I've hopefully have shown today, there is some potential that needs to be unlocked. So it's not there for the grasp right now, but it is something that can develop over time, and something that we will hope will develop over time. So there are no short-term rewards, or very few, but I would like to view it as something that might be part of a new attitude, of a new system, if you want, of rewards and other things that might serve as motivation or as incentives to provide more materials for fewer costs. And that is something that is both useful with regard to the ideology that MOOCs share with open educational resources, which is to democratize education, and also with regard to the gains for all the individuals and institutions involved. So ideally, we are aiming at a win-win situation for both those people that are engaged in creating and producing and providing MOOCs, as well as those people who use them and to participate in them. And I think that's all I've got. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. We have time for some questions. Maybe in the front. Can we start over here?
Hi, thank you for your presentation. Great overview of all the different meanings of open. And I think one aspect that you didn't mention that I actually think is very important is deep linking. Okay? The ability to directly have a link to a video or to a piece of text or even to a simulation that's in a MOOC. If you go back to the Open Educational Resources movement, OpenCourseware and stuff like that from 2003, we had this open license, and I went to all these conferences where we kept saying how important it was. But actually, we have very, very few cases of successful reuse at the level of resources being changed, other than translation. What we saw much more successful was curation, where you had, for example, David Wiley's initial course that inspired the CMOOCs, that inspired the peer-to-peer university, was basically saying, here's a really great physics video from edX, and here's another one from IIT Bombay, and here's a really good open access article, and I'm going to link this, and then we're going to have a discussion. And at that point, we weren't so concerned about whether this thing is CC licensed or GPL, or you can't change it or anything. As long as we could give a direct link and people could access it, and we could have a learning, and right now that is really a massive problem with MOOCs, is that everything is locked into this container. So it would be very interesting to see if MOOC platforms, for example, or courses could say, there are some videos that are very specific to this course, that's, this week, this is what I saw in the discussion forum and stuff like that. Maybe it could be, but to say, well, this is an introduction to this, I'm going to lift it out of the course context and give it a permanent URL and let people who don't have an interest in taking the course also access it. And then you also get rid of all those learners who are just using the course as an online textbook and are driving down your engagement statistics. So.
Yeah, no, I quite agree. So the whole problem of infrastructure, so like how do you go about licensing stuff? What does this mean in practice? Like how do you make your materials truly open? It's usually not enough to just slap a CC BY sticker on it and be done with it. So the new Creative Commons regulations usually, I think they insist that you enter a link where you can find the original material, which is important. But I know just for our part on our platform, what we have been doing is that we offer the videos on our platform, obviously on our server, but we also put them on YouTube. So, and I can see why some people are skeptical about that, because usually you don't want to encourage people to leave your platform or your website and go somewhere else, especially if it's something popular as YouTube, where you might get sidetracked, and yeah, we can see the problem there. But again, I think the benefits outweigh the disadvantages. So, and if once more people do it, then it's not so much risk for the individual institution or lobbyist group or whatever who does it. And that's a real hope with the whole movement. So like at the beginning, it's hard, obviously. You have to put in a lot, you have to invest a lot, and it's more work and it's more effort, and nobody's denying that, least of all me, because I'm directly involved in it. But the thing is that long term, rationally speaking, it is a very plausible and a very rational way to move forward on many levels, like both on the financial front as well as the ideological and the practical. So, and just like educating people about these potential benefits and the possibilities that might arise from it, I think that is one of the crucial points right now. So the details, yes, they need work, and we're going to do that work, but at the moment we have to sort of push the issue on more than one front, I think.
Hi, Pablo Shah from Geneva. Actually, I don't know how many MOOCs you did, but the problem with going open is not that what I create, but we want to put barriers on what we create, but that we reuse a lot of material which is protected. I mean, if we did a MOOC out of your talk, this image with the thank you and the flowers, we should check that we have the IP for this image, and paying for the IP of the image is not the same if I say, okay, it will be used in this context, or it will be reusable by anyone at no price, at no cost, because then I have to clear IP for every possible use. And IP is not even very easy, even if you put CC by non-commercial. When is non-commercial in a classroom if the students pay a fee? Is a fee of 1,000 per year enough to be commercial or not? Is 10,000, 20,000? So IP issues are very complicated, and this is very often why, I mean, we spend a lot of time on it, and this is very often why we don't go into OER, because it's much too complicated.
No, you're quite right. And actually, just with regard to my presentation, I'm working in the area of open education. So all my slides, all my pictures, if there's no copyright on it or no specific information, then you can automatically assume that they're CC0, meaning that anybody can use these images. I got them off Pixabay or other platforms, Flickr, for example, who give you the options of using pictures in the public domain. If I had used any pictures that were under copyright, I probably wouldn't do that because that sort of goes against the whole idea. But if I had a CC BY or a CC BY SA picture in that presentation, it would be labeled as such. And thus, if I decide to put up these slides, and I probably will do so because it's departmental policy where I work, they will get the CC BY sticker, and they can be downloaded freely off the internet, meaning that all the pictures in there, if I had used any graphs or any tables or anything like that, it would be reusable, and people could work with that, modify it, take pieces out of it, whatever they like. But usually people don't make these sort of arrangements. So when people create slides, let's say for a lecture, they use stuff that they shouldn't technically be using. And many people sort of feel secure in the boundaries of learning management systems, where they have like a closed group of students who is able to access the materials, and so any copyright infringements won't get outside. They won't be published on the internet and things like that. But as we have seen, first of all, this is not a surefire way. If one of your students goes with the material, puts it somewhere, you're technically liable for copyright infringement. And even so, it's not that much more work if you're looking for pictures and materials that are openly licensed than when you're looking for materials anyway. Of course, you have your channels, you have colleagues where you get materials from, you have sites on the internet, you're sharing among peers and so on. And obviously, the copyright situation is usually not the highest priority when looking for good materials. Like quality is usually the thing that we're going for. But this doesn't have to be mutually inclusive. So you can look for high quality materials, pictures, texts, whatever, on the internet because more and more OER repositories come up. Again, they're very decentralized. You have to know where to look, and the whole situation is in no way satisfactory at the moment. But it is there. It is starting. It is going in the right direction, and we are expecting a big increase in freely available materials in the coming years.
But I mean, it's not that we're looking for a random image, I mean, or a thank you thing. It's that people want to cite this article published in Nature in January 2015. And if this article is not free, then you cannot find it elsewhere. I mean, there's no way you can do it.
Quite right, and that's also another problematic area. Like if you're like within academia, we have the right to citation, so we can quote other people's texts. We technically cannot quote pictures unless they're a subject of our analysis. At least in Austrian copyright law, that's the case. I'm not that familiar with other national copyright laws. But again, if you're looking at content that you want to use for lecturing, that is closed, that has copyright law on it, you have to be very careful with what you do. And we don't have like a legal situation where everything is clear right now, just because it's a new movement, it's a new idea, and we don't know exactly, like for example in Austrian copyright, technically I am not allowed to provide any materials as CC0, because CC0 comes from declaring your copyright as null and void, and the Austrian copyright technically doesn't allow that. And this is one front we're working on. We want to make that possible. It should be possible because it makes all our lives easier. But technically, I'm not allowed to do that. In other countries, it is different. And so what you can and what you cannot do is not something, it's not a kind of knowledge that comes easily to you. You have to get educated, you have to study, you have to work on the specific regulations for your country and any specific cases that might apply to your lecturing, like for example, private courses where you charge people a tuition fee. And again, there's no 100% clarity of what you're allowed and what you're not allowed to do. The only clarity that you can get is when you're getting sued, and then you have some court ruling. That's like the only clarity that you can get. So you can only work based on the estimations and the expertise of law experts. That's really what we are working on. And here again, the expertises differ. So one lawyer might say, okay, no, this is no problem. Others say, no, I wouldn't do that. It's a bit of a sketchy area. And this is the basis on, that we have to work with. But the thing is, that's not just the case with open materials, that's the case with any copyright materials. So you always, technically, you always need to concern yourself with questions of copyright and what you're allowed to do when lecturing, when making materials available to your students, and so on. And the one thing that sort of speaks for the open education movement is that it is trying, as one of its very first principles and, in the movement, to make the situation easier for everybody involved. So less complications with regard to the law. We're trying to make it easier. Again, it's not always as easy as we would like, but the whole idea is to make the situation graspable and manageable by the lay person, ideally the lay person who is a lecturer in higher education.
Thank you. I apologize, we are out of time. Maybe we can continue some of this dialogue after the session, but I'd like to thank the speaker again. And our final presenter this afternoon is Jose María Alvarez from right here at UC3M. He will be presenting a talk entitled Measuring the Degree of Innovation in Education Through the Implementation of an Indicator Based on Analyzing MOOC-Related Activities. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. Well, good afternoon all. May I take this opportunity of welcoming you all here today to this amazing presentation. Maybe because it's the last one, but it's going to be amazing, hopefully. My name is Jose María. I'm visiting professor within this university in the Department of Computer Science and Engineering. And my background is in linked data, big data, social network analysis, and now I'm trying to become a good contributor to digital education. So let me first raise some question. Which is the most innovative country, university, or person, and how you can measure that? Do you have any insight of which are the measures that are being used to assess that the country is the most innovative one, a university or a person? No? Well, I was expecting that, so I have the response. We have a list of the most innovative countries in terms of how easy it is to create a business, the number of startups, and different types of metrics. In regards to universities, we have a classification made by Thomson Reuters, and in which we have the number of patterns, number of research articles, number of spin-offs, and many other, let's say, indicators to measure how much innovation we can find in some institution. And regarding people, well, in general, here in this list, you can find persons like Elon Musk, Larry Page, Jeff Bezos, the typical ones from the large technological companies. No? And there is another question for me. What about digital education? Do we have any way to measure the innovation in education? Maybe I'm not very sure. I will try to draw some or to outline some, let's say, manners of doing that, no? And why this is important? Okay, we all know that we are living the digital transformation, the fourth industrial revolution. That mainly is we have a lot of digital technology that is in that case a mean, it's not a goal. We have the digital technology to empower people and to change a corporate culture. No? And that matters in any industry, in any company, in any sector, and even in our daily life activities. No? So in digital education, in higher education, we are living a kind of digital trip. No, from traditional classroom, the traditional classroom in which we have interaction between students and teachers. We have direct real-time feedback from students. We have the face-to-face feeling. No? On the other hand, we have the digital classroom, the digital environment in which, okay, we don't have those advantages, but we have another ones, no? That we will outline later. So we are living this transformation. So can we measure how much a country university is investing in digitalization and in innovation? Well, yeah, in general, in education, in general. Maybe this is hard to answer. And actually, as far as I know, there are not so much information about that. No? So why this is important? Okay, if I put my hat as a student, I would like to have the best university in terms of innovation. Why? Because I want to have the best education to improve my job opportunities and to have better career development. No? And in general, when you look for a university, what you have there is a tangled environment of program, courses, rankings, and you are like, okay, why? In which factor I have to pay attention? No? And on the other hand, if I am an institution, in a higher education institution, like a university, I would like to have more innovation. I would like to have like a stamp of innovation. Why? Because I want to attract the best students, the best researchers, and I want to have more funding. No? So that's why it's important to have both innovation and innovation through digital technologies in universities, not to empower people and to change the corporate culture. So for doing that, we have a driver of change. This driver of change, usually, or the one that we are talking in this conference, as you may know, are massive open online courses. No? So we have here a lot of advantages like efficiency. We have better resources in general, high quality resources. We have more flexibility. We have cost and time efficient access to contents whenever you want, whenever you can. In general, we are also changing a bit the learning and assessment methods. And why we do that? Just to equip people with the best skills for their career in general. No? We want to equip people with the best skills. So if we take as a grand truth that the MOOC is the driver of change, is empowered by digital technologies, and these digital technologies are conducting to innovation, can we use MOOCs to know the degree of innovation in a country, university, or even we could think in the concept of digital teacher. No? That teacher that is using MOOCs to deliver their lectures. So this is why we are doing this talk and this research. How we are measuring the degree of innovation in higher education? Well, as you may know, there are a lot of rankings, the well-established rankings. I just took 3 of them, the Shanghai ranking, the QS World ranking, and the Web of Metrics. And all of them have a good set of indicators. In general, quality of education, quality of research. They have metrics like a number of Nobel Prizes, presence on the web. So actually, it seems that they almost reflect the situation of a university, but somehow they are a little bit old-fashioned. No? So what about innovation? What about digitalization? It's hard to find the proper indicator to measure the degree of innovation. Maybe what we can find, apart from the ranking published by Thomson Reuters, is this study by OECD, but this is focusing in primary and secondary education. They have indicators like number of schools with internet connection, number of schools with laptops, things like that. No? But what is completely missing in general in these rankings is the concept of digitalization. That is quite important in the current digital environment. No? We have many other types of indexes because here what we have is a commonality, the methodology, no? to create these indexes. In general, when we have a lot of information, we have to compile this information and somehow provide just one quantitative value to be able to compare the different alternatives. No? So this is something that is being done in many, many environments, like the H index, the web index for the web, open data index for smart cities, for cloud providers. In any environment, we can find this concept of an index. And actually, what is an index? It's just a composition through some kind of operator of different indicators that are measured by different metrics. No? So this is a commonality that we can take for defining our own indicator. No? And this is what we can use, or what we want to deliver to outline a first version, a first attempt to create an indicator for measuring the degree of innovation and higher education through the use or the creation of MOOC-related activities. No? And that's the name, just the first one that we have coined. Maybe it's not the best one, but still it's not bad. No? My KPI, no? MOOC Innovation Performance Indicator. So since we have just a name for the indicator, what we need is a set of metrics to be able to measure that indicator. That actually is just a qualitative definition. So for defining a metric, we need some identifier, we need a formula, we need a scope. We can have different types of metrics. We can have ratios, relative values, absolute values. We can have estimated values, range values, average values, and we can have even more and more dimensions, like the topic, the size of an entity in which we are measuring something, other university rankings, the presence in social networks. We can measure something taking a lot of dimensions. But what we have done is to define an initial set of potential metrics to measure the MOOC-related activities and higher education entities. No? For instance, we have the metric ID, the definition, the formula, and the scope. The scope mainly country, university, degree, or course. For instance, metric 1 is quite simple, but quite representative. No? Number of courses published as a MOOC divided by the total number of courses. Scope, degree, and university. This just gives us some relative value that can be useful to compare our activity with other universities or even with other countries. No? We have metric 2, number of courses published as a MOOC, and depending on the size of my entity, it will be my entity rewarded or not. And following this approach, we have defined around 11 metrics. We are still in the stage of refining the metrics, of finding the concrete details and parameters that we have to include there, the functions, but this is the first attempt that we have done. For instance, to interpret the different groups of metrics, we have actually 3 different groups. The first one just is a relative value to compare those traditional activities in comparison with the MOOC courses. No? So we want to answer the question to what extent some university, some entity is engaged with digital technologies from MOOCs. No? So the range 0, no MOOC activity, 1, the complete digital university. No, let's say, physical commodities, lectures, even person. No? Maybe there's a robot taught in the courses. So we can customize these metrics using different parameters like the topic or the category in which the MOOC is being published. The second set of metrics represents, again, a value, but a value regarding the size of the university. If we agree that the creation of a MOOC represents a huge effort for the institution, for the people, we need infrastructure, we need technicians, we need skills to produce the videos, to produce images, to produce a lot of things. What we want with this metrics is to reward those universities that are smaller, because they are expected to have less resources. So this is the example of metric 8 and metric 9. No? They follow a kind of power law distribution, an inverse power law distribution. Better if it's smaller. If your institution is small and they have MOOC-related activities, they will have more impact. And the last group of metrics, actually just one, is a relative value, including a new variable. Not just the size, but also the position in some existing ranking. In general, for instance, we can take the Shanghai ranking. The idea, again, is to expect to answer a question. No? If we have those universities already in existing rankings with a long tradition, they are expected to also lead digital transformation and digital transformation through MOOCs. So what we want to know is if this is actually true. So we have this initial set of metrics and some initial insights. If we agree that MOOC-related activities can be used as an indicator of innovation, then MOOC activities should be rewarded. The size of the university must have some impact on that, and the leading universities in existing rankings should also be the leaders in MOOC-related activities. Otherwise, we can go to the final slide. Being the last presentation, maybe you will push final slide, but no, I am going to continue. And how we are validating our approach. Okay, we have conducted some experiments. Actually, we have gathered information from different platforms, in general edX and Coursera. We have also gathered information from the universities that is available in Wikipedia. We have selected some metrics to be calculated. We don't have all the information we need to calculate all the metrics, but still we were able to calculate some of them. No? And finally, we have making our own rank. So selection of the MOOC platforms, inclusion criteria, just those in which there are European universities. Two main selected platforms, edX, we get information via the syndication service, and Coursera via the API. We also requested access to other platforms that we didn't get the approval, so we couldn't, no? Especially Udemy, just API request was rejected without any reason. But well, selection of metrics, those that required some validation regarding what the information that we have is the number of courses that have been published, the size of the university, and existing position in Shanghai ranking. No? So these are the metrics that are compiling this information in some value. Selection of universities, inclusion criteria, European universities that are somehow publishing at least one MOOC, and in total we have 36 universities. And we have automated somehow the process of getting the data and calculating the metrics with a Python client that gather the data from the APIs. We are also using a service to calculate the number of social shares. We got also information from the Wikipedia about the size of the university and other metadata. And finally, the Shanghai ranking. So the first table that we got is about metric 11. Metric 11 tries to make a comparison between the universities in some countries that are part of the Shanghai ranking and those that are also having MOOC activities. For instance, in the first row, Switzerland, we have at least 5 universities that have published one MOOC. And in the Shanghai ranking, in the last version, we have 8 universities. So let's say that 63% of universities of Switzerland in the Shanghai ranking are also having MOOC activities. So we can say that those universities are also quite innovative. On the other side, we have Germany, in which they have 39 universities in the Shanghai ranking, but at least from the sample that we have, just 3 of them are having MOOC-related activities. That is quite low, no? So it seems that based on traditional indicators, German universities are quite good, but in terms of MOOC-related activities and what we can understand as digital education are not so active. And regarding other metrics, for instance, metric 2, that is measuring the number of MOOCs published regarding the size of the university, this is the top 10. No? So the first one is the Swiss Federal Institute of Technology in Lausanne, that they have published a lot of MOOCs, and the size is not so big, no? Mid-size. No? And it makes sense, the classification in general. No? Institute of Lausanne, Delft University, Central Superior of Paris, Chalmers, Zurich. Also, our university is here. So that means that some of the university, even they are not the bigger ones, they are making very good progresses, achievements in terms of publishing MOOCs, in terms of digital transformation in education. Don't be offended if your university is not here, because it's just a small sample, okay? 36 universities, 11 countries, and this is just the top 10, no? So maybe in the paper you will find your university. So some initial insights after doing this, after conducting this experiment. Okay, this is a general ground truth. Just a few European universities have already published MOOCs in comparison to American ones. 11 European countries and 36 universities have performed some MOOC-related activity, while in the Shanghai ranking we can find 25 different European countries and 209 universities. So that means that the activity with regards to creation of MOOCs is still very low in Europe. No? Always in the frame of our sample. European universities have only participated in 255 MOOCs, that represents 15% of all the courses that we have gathered from the APIs. No? So that's very, very, very low percent. There are research limitations, because we have to be fair with this analysis and with the conclusions. Our size is just, we are just evaluating universities at the European scope, 36 universities, 2 MOOC platforms, and around 1,600 courses. So it's quite small, no? If we consider the size of or the number of courses that we have in EDX and Coursera, just taking these 2 platforms, no? And just 3 metrics. So maybe this is something that we have to extend in the future. And just to finish the presentation, some conclusions. Okay, the educational sector, as one of the leading sectors in innovation, we are living a transformation, a digital transformation. So it seems that existing rankings are not reflecting, are not considering indicators related to innovation, related to MOOC activities. So we have to somehow define something to be included in those rankings. No? And mainly because the effort of creating MOOCs must be rewarded somehow. No? On the other hand, some future work overcome the research limitations, extend this kind of studies to other platforms, and refine, improve the formulas. No? And finally, maybe what we would like to have is a kind of observatory of innovation in digital higher education. This is one of the main future actions that we have in mind. So that's all on my side. Thank you very much for your attention. And I would like also to say a big thank you to the organization and also to my wonderful colleagues, team. Some of them are in the audience. And all of the resources, I don't know if I have to put this in after the last presentation, but well, let's see. Everything is published in a repository. It's open and free and available, so you can download and criticize, whatever. And I put this stamp, and I'm not very sure now, after the last discussion. But well, it's here, and I have more. I have credits. So all my images are good ones, I mean, under the proper licensing, okay? So thank you very much again, and if you have any question, I will be very willing to answer you.
Thank you so much. We do have time for a few questions. Can we start maybe in the back here?
I may be mistaken, but I thought one of your metrics was basically, or a couple of the metrics were basically the number of MOOCs divided by the size of the university, like the number of courses the university has or the number of academics they have. And another measure or measures were the number of MOOCs multiplied by the size of the university.
No, but it depends on the function. I mean, one is an exponential function, and the other one a negative exponential function. So the point is if we want to reward or just to decrease the value. That's why this is something that we have to refine. Maybe we don't have the proper background to fit the proper function, but what we have in mind is that, okay, depending on the size, I want to reward the first activity and then like the long tail. If you publish the first MOOC, okay, you will get a good value, and then if you have 100, for you it's almost nothing, for your institution. So it depends. So we are playing a bit with the exponential and logarithmic functions.
It's like one measure measures the commitment and the other measures the impact.
Exactly, yeah.
Question over here, to the right.
Thank you. I was wondering, one of the metrics that I would like to see is how many students are involved in the creation of MOOCs, because if we are serious about digital education, I think students also have to be, let's say, very adept at creating digital content and have digital communication skills. So shouldn't that be one of the metrics?
Yeah, actually it could be a very good metric, But we have a lot of restrictions because the APIs sometimes don't give us that information. What I think we have, for instance, in using the Coursera API is the number of enrolled users. This is something that we can get from Coursera, but maybe not in other APIs. So that's why then it's not easy to compare.
Very hard to measure.
Probably. Yeah, let's say the common part of the data model to feed the formula is not an easy thing. And even having the figures of the universities, we just take those available in Wikipedia, that maybe are not up to date or maybe are not the correct ones.
Thank you.
Thanks.
And another question right behind.
Thank you very much. I'm Ignacio Espujol from Universidad Politécnica de Valencia. I would like to know how have you chosen the 36 universities? Mm-hmm. Because, for example, you've said that there are 3 universities with courses in Coursera and edX, and from Spain, and there are at least I know 4 of them.
Yeah.
And I think if there is there a criterion to select these 36 universities?
Well, actually, for instance, using or accessing the API of Coursera, you just get the whole data set of courses. So you just have there the information about the universities. No, we have filtered out all the universities that are not European. So finally, we got actually in a small set, no? And regarding EDX, what we are accessing is information via the syndication service that is not covering all the courses. So maybe we just have a sample of the courses available in EDX.
Because, for example, in Spain you have Universidad Autónoma de Madrid, Carlos III, Universidad Politécnica de Valencia, and Universidad Autónoma de Barcelona in Coursera. And you said 3, so at least one of them is out.
Yeah. So maybe it's because in the syndication service of EDX it's not giving us all the courses. Just maybe the last courses published the last 6 months.
I don't think so, because in the last 6 months all of these 4 universities have published courses, but I don't know why. But
the data is open. So I'm not lying.
Yeah,
so
no, I know.
That's the point. So maybe if someone wants to contribute, I will be very willing to have contributors to the Python client.
And are you planning to incorporate the courses on Myriada X? Because I know your university has also courses in Myriada X.
Well, it's a good question. In our case, we just focus on those courses that are in English.
That's the one point. Only courses in English, even on edX.
Yeah.
That's it.
So maybe this could be also.
This could be also another thing. All right. Thank you.
I apologize. We are out of time for this session, but I wanted to thank our speakers once more.